Hello and welcome to the World Built Environment Forum webinar series. My name is Anil Sawhney and I'm the head of sustainability at the RICS. As you see, the title of today's webinar is The Fourth Industrial Revolution, the Future of Construction Workforce. We will be discussing this topic in detail through a series of discussion prompts. The topic really is very interesting and timely. I know folks have already begun talking about the fifth industrial revolution, adding the people and the social dimension to the fourth industrial revolution. But what we are doing today is discussing the implications of Industry 4.0 on the construction sector broadly, but then also drawing out implications of Industry 4.0 on our workforce. Really, it's not a set of software, tools, technologies, or trends we want to discuss. It's the paradigm or the operating model that the Industry 4.0 presents. Industry 4.0 really helps us question how we design, how we produce, how we construct, assemble, operate, and even think about the whole of life of the asset. Alongside that, it also helps us question and perhaps redesign how we procure, how we design, deliver digital tools and data that helps produce our projects and assets in a successful fashion. So think of Industry 4.0 or Industry 5.0 more of a paradigm that helps glue all these aspects together. And if we were to adopt some aspects of Industry 4.0, what kind of new teams, new roles, new aspects of our work we need to consider. So I have also written, co-edited a handbook on Construction 4.0, so I'm very passionate and interested in this topic. So to really do this, my role is to be a moderator. I'm supposed to speak the least because we have a set of three extremely well qualified panel members. So it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Dr. Ioannis Brilakis from the University of Cambridge. I met him several years ago and I follow his work. He does some excellent work. So Ioannis, if you can say hi to our audience.
Hi, Neil. Thank you for the introduction, and hi to everyone. My name is Ioannis Brilakis. I work for the University of Cambridge. I'm a professor of civil and information engineering, and my focus is the broader space of construction informatics.
Thank you, Ioannis. Next is Chris Cooper, who's a member of the RICS, co-founder and director of Procord Consulting. He works extensively in advising large mega projects on the role of these improvements for their project teams. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, Chris Cooper, run a chartered quantity surveying practice and have a specific focus on digital in how we can improve mega projects outcomes for them.
Welcome, Chris. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Amy Marks. She's Executive Vice President, Global Strategy with Symetri. She is also very well known by millions of followers as the Queen of Prefab. I'm a co-conspirator with her in trying to promote industrialized construction in our universities all around the world. So I work closely with her. Thanks, Amy, for sharing all your wisdom. Welcome.
Thank you, Anil. I always love spending time with you. Obviously, we've done so many great things and fun things together to move the industry forward. I'm now with Symetri as their EVP of Global Strategy. So understanding new ways of working, sustainably, more sustainably, using things like industrialized construction, but understanding the data platforms and new technologies that actually move our industry forward. For those of you who don't know us, we are one of Autodesk's largest channel partners, but we also are a technology company that owns our own proprietary tech that is a lot of the digital glue that enhances many people's technology as well as connects it.
Thank you all. We will begin our discussion now. Just as we're preparing for this session, a comment was made that perhaps very soon the role of moderator will be overtaken by ChatGPT. So you can see how fast technology is moving. But before I proceed, I'd like to quickly mention to our audience, I know there are folks joining from various time zones. Please do submit your questions to our panel, as it really helps to bring the conversation to life. If you are new to these webinars, you should see that you can submit questions at any time using the question box that should show up on your screen in the ribbon. We'll pick up as many as we can as we go through the session. Generally, we also do a follow-up, sort of a web article in which we try and address questions if we run out of time. But my role really here is to manage time. So hopefully we'll integrate these questions into our discussion. So I'm going to begin our conversation. Amy, I know many of us look at LinkedIn and Twitter to gauge the implementation and adoption of technology in our sector. I don't think that is the best way to measure what's happening on the ground. And I know that you've done many of these ideas, implemented them in your business, as well as now in your global role. You go meet so many project teams, so many organizations to see what's happening on the ground. So my first question to you, Amy, is where is construction currently at in terms of Industry 4.0, Construction 4.0? And remember, we are using this term Industry 4.0 broadly to mean all things digital, all things advanced manufacturing, industrialized, including workforce development and so on. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this aspect.
Yes, well, I wish my day job was social media. Unfortunately, it's not. So that's just an added habit, I would say, from years and years of being on it. But yeah, I think it's not really the best way to understand what's going on, although it is one way to understand the trends. And I think reading articles and academic papers, my colleague here that works in the university, but pairing and partnering with universities to understand what's going on. There's a lot of ways you can actually take the information in. I'm very lucky that I go to, I don't know, 40 different conferences a year as a keynote, and I'm able to speak not only to the audience, but the better part is they speak to me, and I can go out and see actual jobs that we're implementing technology on, that I'm seeing new ways of working. And I would say this, you know, it is a very broad question, and the industry is very broad, right? So it's an ecosystem of like 17 different industries. And I would say the groups that are doing the best at it right now, first and foremost, you have to have your data connected. So like those who have obviously years ago decided a common data environment solution so that they could actually move to the cloud and people could share information in the cloud and, you know, and consume and disseminate technology using the cloud are doing best at the moment now. And I would say that those that have more complex buildings, so the data center guys, the pharmaceutical companies, manufacturers, pharma, those are the guys, hospitals that are sort of incorporating the most because they have the most above the, you know, ceilings, behind the walls and underground. A lot of the technical, you know, services business actually drives a lot of the innovation. That's where the money is in a lot of these jobs, right? So the more money and complexity in these jobs, I see those companies have moved it all to the cloud. They have connected the data using, you know, whether that's Autodesk as a platform, connecting design to fabrication to field and up to digital twins. So the more complex I would say the market you work in, the better you're doing at incorporating some of these things, right? And I think that I've seen that for the most part, that unfortunately there's a lot of stories about housing all day long. And I would say that's the least mature sector, but the most reported upon. That is, you know, unfortunate for our world.
So Amy, just to follow up quickly on something you said, are you seeing organizations having some sort of an implementation plan or a roadmap? Especially, I'm more interested in your work related to large subcontractors, because I know you do a lot of MEP, a lot of electrical, and I think exciting stuff is happening not only at perhaps the construction or contractor level, but also at some of these large trade partners, especially, right, I believe in the UK and the US.
Look, I mean, we did a survey last year at the Advancing Prefabrication Conference, which is in February this year in Denver. And we asked the audience, you know, what is your business going to look like in 5 years? And I think it was almost 60% said they're going to move it further left in the design build process. Now, this is an audience of contractors and service contractors and architects, engineers, and owners, but mostly the contractors in that room. So they're moving further left. They're getting more involved in understanding decarbonization. They're tracking decarbonization. We did a lot of studies on that. They're using disassembly and reuse practices for DFMA. They are thinking about those types of things, but almost 34% of them said in the next 5 years, our business will be unrecognizable compared to the business that it is today. And we're already on that journey. So what that tells me is that, we're seeing the rise of manufacturing, obviously. I left Autodesk to come to Symetri because I love the BIM to fabrication to field connection that Navigate gives with Allied BIM and then up to the Autodesk Construction Cloud and, bookended by Revit. I need that workflow for our contractors. They need to have a cloud-based BIM to fab to field to digital twin conversation. So I am seeing that, everyone's moving further left if they have the make data, not just in their heads, but if they've really put the data up in technology to communicate that, they're moving to the power positions. They're doing things like checking, Navigate 0 and one-click LCA if you're a mechanical contractor and you want to understand, operational carbon and embodied carbon of what it is you're designing. Remember, those that have the make information actually win out at the end. The building product manufacturers, the guys that are actually putting together the skids and the racks and the risers. I think it's an interesting time because you're seeing business models change where the big serial owners are not going to pay on waste anymore. Most of our businesses are set up to make money off the waste, the lack of information, the misinformation, the constant iteration of different information. They don't want us to make money on waste anymore, especially when 30 to 40% of what is in our landfills is construction waste. So you're talking about huge transaction waste, even before that, of about 41%. So if you had $100 to make a building, 41% of that is transactional waste of redrawing things that were not drawn correctly, assumption-based design, going out to bid for people that will never win. And then after that, if you have money left over, 30 to 40% of that, most materials you spent money on are in the trash. I mean, think about that. If the government really understood, or big owners really understood that, and they do, they're taking more control over this, and they're going to the people that have the make information, collected in technology.
Excellent, thank you, Amy. I think that actually connects very well to the next question that I was going to ask Chris. And Chris, I know you're working on very large, important exemplar projects. I know in the UK, but perhaps in other areas also. And Amy just brought up this idea of what are owners thinking, what are owners or clients doing when it comes to this kind of aspect. So since you work on these large programs, I was going to ask you, how will Industry 4.0 impact on the roles and jobs in the construction sector? And you can see this from the point of view of the whole supply chain, perhaps looking at clients as well, because they are also going to be searching for folks who understand these concepts and can help them engage with market leaders, construction companies, subcontractors who are moving quickly in this direction. So I'd love to hear your views.
No, that's right, Anil. I think a lot of our work is helping those end clients to realise the benefits. And to Amy's point, I was talking to someone the other week about a new prefab drywall system, where previously traditionally they had skips that they were filling up after the end of the job, whereas now they're walking away with a bucket full of rubbish and that's it. The benefits in minimising waste are just there to be seen from a cost perspective, sustainability perspective. But I suppose back to your original question on how is it impacting roles within the construction area. Initially, I think there was a bit of a fear. I saw a PwC report, something like 24% of roles potentially at risk as a result of Industry 4.0. Obviously, we've moved on a bit since that report. And I think you can still see in the industry there's, huge skills shortages. We've still got a number of jobs, but especially in the areas that I work, the impact on the job roles are new areas opening up. Heads of innovation aren't just a sort of token role anymore. They are a role with data scientists sitting around them. There's people in there looking at innovation in terms of, right, let's engage with the supply chain early. And we try to help a number of clients in sort of sitting down with the potential supply chain, not just at a top level, but also tiers 2, 3, to understand how can we innovate, how can we bring new things in, what are you doing that we might ordinarily write out of our specification because we've constrained it without realizing. And I think the impact for all of us working in that area is that we have to think a little bit harder about not just doing what we did before, looking at what outcomes we want. And that is really then sort of being able to latch on to systems, to data, to try and give us better perceptions to solve the complex problems that we're not necessarily solving at the moment. So I think there's a clear impact. I think from our perspective, we're investing in technologies to help us with those decisions. I think that's retraining our skill set. So we're having to learn things. So a traditional quantity surveyor wouldn't necessarily get involved in building applications, etc. But we're helping people build risk negotiation apps. We're looking at how we can use data to determine sort of tender pricing. So there's a huge impact on our industry at that sort of top level. Where do I think there's still a way to go? I think when it comes to the data that we're using, there needs to be more challenging of that data and ensuring its integrity is there before it's being used. And I think that's where roles will start to pivot towards. How do we get this data? How do we share it collaboratively? But with a lot of mega projects, you also have the dynamic of some of that data is sensitive. So we've got to be careful with what we're doing with that. So I can see it on many of the major projects, clients are starting to sort of blueprint their technology, but also think about the different scenarios that they need to use it for, and possibly some of the constraints they need to put around that.
Excellent, thank you, Chris. I think the key highlight from what you just discussed was focus on outcomes, and I think that's where large owners probably can play a big role. So if the large owner pushes decarbonization on a project, then obviously the supply chain has to figure out ways to deliver, and then QSs, as you said, probably need to play a very important role, if nothing else, in determining quantities of materials that can then be used to do carbon footprint calculations. So I think that's pretty exciting. I actually say that very soon all of us, we are going to live in the world of co-pilots. I think every one of us will have a co-pilot. I've pretty much forgotten all tips and tricks in Excel. I just rely on a co-pilot which can tell me how to find an average. So I think very soon that shift will definitely happen. And think of that as an estimator. If you had tools that can assist you in doing repetitive stuff, it's going to significantly impact the way you perform the tasks on a project. So moving on, I think Ioannis, I remember visiting your lab. I guess I'm going to take a guess about 5 years ago, and you showed me all the cool stuff that you were doing with highways, with digital twins, and all your students and research scholars working around you. I also really enjoyed seeing how close you were to the industry. So the work that you were doing at that time, and I'm sure you're continuing that, was pretty much what I call use-inspired research. So it really had an application and had an industry pain point in mind as you were conducting that research. So what I'd like to know from you is, as sitting in this very interesting role of working with academia, with researchers and industry, what roles and skills do you think Industry 4.0 will be in greater demand for? I know several of your students or scholars are probably filling up roles of data analysts, AI engineers, and so on, or even prompt engineers. So what are you seeing, and what do you think are the prospects for new teams, new roles as we move forward?
So I think the market is starting to become a bit more complex. And I can give an example. 100 years ago, when construction equipment came about, we went from people interfacing directly with work, with people becoming machine operators who then do the work. So the machine came between the human and the work. The same thing applies with the information age. We went from engineers who would use first principles to directly design something into those engineers becoming two categories: the users, who would use the software to do that same work faster, better, but also the designers of the software, who have to come in and create that software and provide that automation. And so that applies across every facet of the industry. And if we use the twin systems loop and focus on monitoring, modeling, forecasting, and forensics, and automation and robotics, the key elements in the industry's modernization, this applies in every one of those bits. For example, under monitoring, we will have needs for people who will be acting as the users of monitoring systems and have the ability to install them and apply them, but also the people who will be designing and creating those monitoring systems. Same thing for modeling. We have constantly better and better modeling tools, from BIM to digital twins and so on. And again, we're going to need very efficient and effective users of these systems, able to use them to design, construct, operate, and maintain assets. But also we're going to need those skills for the designers of those systems. On the forecasting and the forensics, the ability to go back in time and understand what happened to my asset, as well as the ability to go forward in time and predict what might happen to my asset, the analytics, the prediction based on the information I have. Again, it's the same thing. I need the data analysts, the users of the systems that will give me the answers to these questions, but I also need the designers of the systems that will produce the methods of the algorithms and everything that the industry is going to use. And last but not least, for automation and robotics in the industry, same rules apply. We're not going to automate everything, certainly not straight away. If we're looking at the next 30 years forward, the best we can hope for is what happens with vehicles, the autonomous vehicles. Something similar might happen on our side with more autonomous robotics coming on site or various automation systems. Again, we're going to need proficient users of those systems. That's the future of the construction workforce, but also proficient designers of those systems that can put them in place and create them. And to me, that's where I see the demand growing over time.
Thank you. One of the things that I remember from my university days was that we would have a clear demarcation between jealously what we used to call bio or nano, and then there was construction. Are you seeing blurring of boundaries in those disciplines also? Because I know that you do a lot of work which is at the interface of perhaps computer science. Is that already happened on university campuses where all these transdisciplinary teams are coming together to solve problems?
I think we're actually filling a gap that we didn't have before. It used to be the case that the software world belonged to computer science, and if I was from civil or architecture or any other area, I would by default seek a computer scientist for anything in that space. That is no longer true, because there is a big intermediate space where none of the traditional disciplines have an immediate expertise or interest in. And that is the space where technology can come to solve a specific engineering problem, in this case, assist the construction industry. That's the gap, and that's the area we need to build skills for. Unavoidably, that space, the in-between space, can draw people from both sides. And so there is some translation from one side to another. I have computer scientists in my team, I have civil engineers in my team, I have electrical engineers in my team as a result of that. But I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing because it helps us learn from the different disciplines and do more as a result.
Thank you. I think at this stage, I'm going to request some interaction with our audience. Maybe if we can possibly run a poll at this stage and get some feedback. So it's a pretty straightforward question. which are the two most important aspects of the Industry 4.0 approach that your organization is either implementing or considering implementing? And the choices that you can pick from are AI and analytics, automation, robotics, enablers such as lean principles and integrated delivery, industrialized construction, including advanced manufacturing, and workforce development. I just read the whole question and choices for you. So let's get some answers. We will try and display what you are telling us, and then we'll move to our next question. So maybe another 30 seconds. So you picked the two most important aspects. Just please pick two in order of importance to you. Okay, if we can perhaps now display. Wow, this is very interesting, a little bit surprising to some extent. Workforce development got pretty high number here, high ranking, so competes or done better than AI and analytics. I know everyone is fascinated with AI and analytics right now, so there may be some bias. So number one, workforce development, touched upon the question that we just were discussing, and then AI and analytics. Amy, we got to write that training program on industrialized construction before this fades away. Well, thank you very much. I think that was very interesting feedback. Now let's move to our next question, which I'm going to bring in. Amy, if you can help me with this question. What steps is construction taking to make its workforce Industry 4.0 ready? I know you had shared with me that you go to these large organizations, do some sort of a workshopping, very interactive sessions with them, to, I shouldn't say gap analysis, but to sort of level set, figure out where they are. And then there is no straight line. I even saw that you had a slide which shared point A, and this is your goal, point B. You could possibly take a straight line, or you can go up, down in a very interesting fashion. So how's that conversation happening when you go out to meet these organizations?
So when I normally meet with C-level executives or VP level executives, I like to ask three questions. Maybe I think you've heard me ask these before, Anil. I ask them, what does your organization want to be when it grows up? And the reason I ask it, look, I'm from New Jersey. We're straight shooters. For those of you who know, I'm an ex-rugby player. I'm kind of tough. I ask it as straight as I can ask it, because in every language that translates, whether it's Tokyo in Japanese or, you know, in Brazil and Portugal, wherever I am, when you ask it in that way, every CEO can answer. And then I ask them, okay, knowing that you want to be that when you grow up, what is keeping you up at night? And what's stopping you from getting there, right? And the third question that I also ask is, what is the evidence that you have seen? What spotty pockets of greatness do you have, or indications that you even can get there? Because I think you have to have some sort of proof in your organization. Like, I could want to be a doctor, but if I'm horrible at math and science, I'm probably not going to be a doctor, right? Like, that's probably not going to happen. So I think first you have to assess your own current state and your potential capabilities, right? I think that's number one. And so I'm seeing a lot of C-level executives implement things like their industrialized construction maturity assessments. They want people to come in, like myself, into their fab shops and our partners to come in and see if it's actually working right, whether it's around the technology or the design components of it, or, you know, simulation of bill of process, bill of material, however they're doing all of their work. I'm seeing they're getting a lot more into understanding benchmarking, whatever that is, whether it's benchmarking against where they're at with AI, benchmarking where they're at with, you know, their employees. I think a lot of the CEOs are really understanding that. And I will say, I have to add something to the last question you said. There are some really great spotty pockets of greatness, right? Like, we do see robots on job sites. I do see people using, you know, the exoskeletons that, you know, even like Hilti has out there all the time. I'm seeing a lot of cool things out on job sites every day. But we're still working in a world that is disconnected. We're a $14 trillion ecosystem that is yet to be connected by e-commerce. And if you look at what's going on in the world right now and what people are trying to prepare themselves for is, what happens if tomorrow that's better connected? What happens if tomorrow an architect can actually look at the information and the productivity around that activity, or actually understand what the parameters are that a robot can actually serve and what they can actually make, and consume that immediately into the design rather than assumption-based design? I think people are really preparing for that moment. Just look at the Forbes article, how many small software companies are popping up. You know, I always say Autodesk is like my Apple platform. On my Apple phone lives Waze, Google Maps, and Apple Maps. Right now at Autodesk on the platform, you know, lots of new companies are coming up. Competitors are getting their information in. You know, we were just at AU and they're talking about Dynamo and SolidWorks and, you know, other people getting into the platform with the data. I think people are getting ready for that inevitable fact that data will become more connected and streamlined. It's not right now. I think we're fooling ourselves if you think that every cool thing that Ioannis has in his shop and in the studios that we visit at the universities can be implemented today seamlessly. No, but they're proof points that once this is connected, that we truly can create some scale if that information was available and the way in which things could be made. Again, that DFMA is not about design, it's more about data. And we're disconnected right now. This Industry 4.0 at its basic function is connecting everything through, you know, technology. We should face facts before we get to Industry 5.0. We're not quite connected yet, but we're seeing a lot of hints and a lot of people's works towards that right now. And we should be aware of that. I would ask every CEO, are you ready for when that happens? If tomorrow the Amazon of construction opens up in Revit and you can click on something and find it, are your products or your processes, have they been productized with that manufacturing information, with its embodied carbon information for somebody to consume it and use it? I'm seeing a lot more people getting prepared. So better strategies, more preparedness for that moment in time, I think.
Amy, one thing that I was quite impressed when you described this work that you do with organizations was the change/transformation model that you talk about. Do you want to quickly share that with the audience as well?
Sure. I mean, I think at its basic premise, you know, you have to understand, you know, if this becomes a platform one day, what is it that you are actually trying to connect? What is the information management and the capabilities that you're trying to understand from the common data environment and sharing of things? Everything needs to be productized, regardless if it's a physicality of a piece part or it's digitized workflow. We have to move to productize things so that we can digitize them, right? Like, you don't automate factories before you actually know the process in which you're going to automate it most effectively. And only then can you start to optimize things so that we can start moving towards better business outcomes, more sustainable outcomes, and truly transform. I think the problem is most people jump towards optimization. It's like when you talk about AI, it's like, what data have you been training around AI, and is it the real data? Look, if you try to train people around BIM models today, how many BIM models can you actually build from that come out of an architecture firm? My contractors would say none of them, like, probably from first glance. So if you're training AI models on assumption-based design, you're going to be confidently inaccurate in the results of that AI. So I think we have to really stop and bring ourselves back to, like, do you have the data in order? Are we getting it organized in such a way so that we can first get insights, and insights sort of happen after the fact? We're hoping to get some of that now. Where very little of that is predictable intelligence. We are far from cognitive learning, and where systems and organizations actually organize and, you know, adjust themselves without people really being involved. And I think that transformation is happening, and I'm seeing more and more people organizing their data, their companies, the systems architecture of where the information is coming from, going to. But first they have to sort of look at business models. Like, I have a friend, my favorite recent story, he showed them how they could be designing something that took 16,000 hours, big company. He took it down to 3 minutes. He took it down to technology to do it in 3 minutes. And guess what happened? Instead of somebody being like, what a great thing, they said, we'll never externalize that. We just lost 16,000 hours of billable time. That's absurd. That is absurd. If you're making money on the waste, transformation is going to be very difficult for you, and you may get smacked in the face as others are transforming, that you will not exist on this planet. If you are thinking about things, how you make money on the waste, and you're allowing people to not move forward because you make money on that waste, your organization is not moving forward, or somebody's job is in jeopardy because they manually do something, you know, this change management is for real. Like, as we say, you will not move forward and transform. You have to take a really hard look at what's stopping you.
Thank you, Amy. So I think you just talked about getting extinct. So the question has come in from the audience, which connects very well. It's a tough question from Henry, and I'm going to read it as is. Evidently, good tech now means that the cost, schedule, risks, etc., are auto-generated in the Ds. I guess you mean 4D, 5D, 6D, meaning that siloed roles and perhaps professional institutions which are predicated upon the silo paradigm are now going to be unnecessarily. So I think, Chris, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're an MRICS, but I'm going to maybe twist it in a positive way. What can RICS and similar professional organizations, professional bodies do to become more synced up and sort of connected to this Industry 4.0 changes that are taking place? But I'm going to volunteer Ioannis and Amy to also address this question.
Yeah, I think I just sort of touched on it earlier about the sort of gaps that are appearing and the blurring of lines between roles. Certainly, I think the RICS needs to focus on what are those gaps that, you know, our roles can blur into, whether that's project management moving into more commercial matters the other way, or looking at data, etc. So I think we need to, in order to not be extinct or replaced by ChatGPT, we need to understand the different roles that come together to build projects and the different solutions. And then I think the RICS needs to think about how we promote those within the organization, how we might change membership qualifications or entry so that we're getting a more diverse set of people through the doors that can then help us grow. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. I do think there's obviously an emphasis on the RICS, but there's an emphasis on ourselves to do that. So Amy was talking there about change management and organizations. So we're a quantity surveying practice, but we helped a client out last year where we looked at all of their systems because they'd gone and picked a load off the shelf. We collaborated with some what we call techie people, and you know we were able to add value in that context to help them bring together a better solution for their system, rather than lots of individual systems that didn't talk together and created waste, like you were saying, Amy, and took lots of time. So I think the role of that you might traditionally apply to organizations within the RICS are going to evolve. I think we all have an onus to transform ourselves, but I'd also like to see the RICS look at those gaps and see how it can bring more people in and bring more training towards us.
Thank you. Ioannis, anything you want to say on this question?
If I can add something here, I would say that all chartered institutes need to start thinking about expanding their scope, because they started with a scope a long time ago, and as the professions are changing and becoming more diverse, and new titles come about and new job functions come about, you need that scope expansion to stay relevant. Otherwise, you will have a constantly decreasing membership or potential membership population. At the same time, chartered institutes have the ability to influence accreditation of universities. And through that power, they can specify how they would expect those individuals to be trained, to be ready for the future. And that is a very good kick in the butt for universities to allow them to modernize and follow the industry that is constantly changing more and more rapidly.
Thank you. Amy, anything from you?
Look, I mean, I always like to look this up as an indicator for myself. I go to TikTok and I say, how many hashtags are viewed on the word welding today? 15.5 billion views of the hashtag welding today on TikTok. How many of the organizations that have changed their business methodology, you know, I'm not putting any figures at the organizers of this, you know, association or anybody else, but if you haven't adapted your, you know, the way in which you look for members, the way in which you're finding people for the, your membership and growing your membership and getting people excited about getting into this space. When you think about where the people are, look, I get a lot of people that want diverse works, right? They ask me, how do I get more women? And I'm like, listen, I told you, I'm a rugby player. I'm the chair of the national partnerships of the U.S. Women's Rugby Foundation. Why? Because I had 4 welders on my kids' high school team, girls that weld. If you truly want this, you have to look in the right places. You have to look where young people are. You have to look where data scientists are being educated. You have to look where women are going to be, right? If you're not, by the way, I put out a notice for sponsorship from U.S. Women's Rugby to get more association partnerships. It's like crickets. All these CEOs that tell me all day long that they want to have more diverse workforce, younger workforce, put your money where your mouth is. Change the way your organization is recruiting, change the way you're looking at social media, change the way, and universities as well. They have to get young people to come and take classes, or people that are changing their routines, not just the associations. The way in which we used to do business is not the way you're going to do business in the next 5 years. The people we need are not coming to this webinar. Let's just face facts, right? Like, we have to go outside of our own group. And even Henry said the irony is not lost on him. It's not lost on me either. We're like preaching to the choir here, right? Like, you've got to go where these people are at, to other industries, to younger people, to more diverse populations. And it's hard. People, you have to want that, right? So like, you can say you want diversity if you're not putting your money where your mouth is. You can say you want innovation if you're not putting your money where your mouth is. You really don't want it. By the way, in the US, the unions are still called the Brotherhood of whatever. Name the ironworkers, carpenters. Like, my 15-year-old daughter does not feel like she can walk up in high school at their table like they even want her to work there or join that union. Let's just be frank. That's factual, right? Like, we have to change the way we are doing business.
Thank you. No, I think that was a very good discussion, which actually connects very well to our next question for Ioannis. I remember my days in an engineering program. I don't think much was talked about in terms of decarbonization, Ioannis, or perhaps social outcomes of our projects. We had a very traditional mindset. So I think since you have done so much work with universities and also interact quite a bit with the industry, how do you address this issue of bringing people from diverse backgrounds and career aspirations, different disciplines, and all kinds of diversity into the construction, first the education system, and then perhaps into the industry?
I'm not sure I have the perfect answer for that, because I don't think we have solved the problem. I think universities are struggling just as much as industry is struggling. There's clearly a lot of work at every single university everywhere in the world to find mechanisms to do that, but it has to be done in such a way that it really works for the end customer, which would be in this case the students coming in, and also the workers or engineers or others coming into a business. So I'm not sure we have any magic bullets on that one yet. What I would like to say is that developing a sense of a profession is not something that happens quickly. If I ask each and every one on the panel, what is a doctor? What is a lawyer? What is an engineer? Everyone has a quick answer on that, because that's like a brand name, like Coca-Cola. This has been around for 100 years now. But I've seen some business cards where someone's job title is phenomenon creator. I don't know what that is, right? And gradually over time, we start to see more and more of a diverse set of industry roles that haven't had the time to build that career path and a clear understanding in the industry and in society of what that role is. And as a result of that, they're struggling. They're struggling to find a way forward. And at the same time, you have the more traditional professions that are starting gradually to face what, for example, the truckers are facing around the world, where we're declaring to everyone we're going to have autonomous trucks. Therefore, there's no need for young people to become truckers. Therefore, we have one of the worst shortages in the world is in truckers, because there's no one entering that industry, and therefore that drives up salaries for those who are still in the business, but without fixing the problem, because no one new is entering that business in the anticipation that eventually this will be a completely automated sector. You see sort of a similar trend in construction, where you have a very aging workforce. But that's not only due to that, it's also due to the fact, to be honest, that we're not offering good benefits, we're not offering good packages. People have alternatives. They can go elsewhere and do a job that's more convenient, not out there in the middle of nowhere, working under difficult weather conditions. And in order to attract them to a more difficult environment, you have to offer a better package. So to me, I never see worker shortage as a real problem. It's more like, I'm not offering a good package, so no one is coming. Hello, offer a better package, people will come. But also help universities train those individuals and explain that that is actually a viable profession. And in fact, in many cases, many people who work on site, electricians, plumbers, others, can make significantly more money and get better job satisfaction than people who work in an office environment.
Thank you. No, I think that's, you make a very good point. So in your view, then Industry 4.0 generally and all the tech stuff that we are doing, is that enabler to getting more people interested in our industry, or you see no difference it really makes?
I think what it will do is it will accelerate the pace of change. And by accelerating the pace of change and the need for new professions and new expertise, or even within your own profession, the need to reskill yourself every few years because the tools keep changing all the time, that will dramatically increase the need for education and the need for continuing education, but also will increase the need for flexible education and the ability for whoever is providing it to be able to adapt to the needs of the time. And this is going back to one of my earlier points. Universities are not used to this. We've set up our departments and our professions 100 years ago. We are not going to cannibalize those and say, oh, I don't need a civil engineering department anymore, that's old. Now let's come up with a new Revit designer department or something else. Because of the way these are structured. So we definitely need better systems to adapt so that we can bring that positive change to the construction workforce demographics.
Thank you, excellent. So I was just in my role, I got a chance to speak to our members globally. Yesterday, I was talking to somebody who was working in New Delhi, India, and they have like a 6 million square feet commercial mixed use development project for which there's so many issues because of lack of work. Where do you bring people to work on these projects when there are similar competing projects going on? So I think this situation is even more complex in emerging markets where you have so much new construction taking place and public and private sector projects are competing for folks who have the right skills and the right mindset. So I think technology definitely, I feel, is going to help, especially in those markets where new construction is just outpacing any other type of work that's taking place. You know, that actually, Chris, connects very well to the question that we're going to address next, which talks about the benefits to the workforce of using Industry 4.0. I heard somewhere that very soon technology can help us do 3D, and this 3D was different from what I had heard before. The dangerous, the difficult, and the dirty work that goes on a construction site can be significantly impacted. Why would we make people do those types of work when it either can be taken off site or taken into a more of a manufacturing environment? assembly can be improved, dangerous stuff need not be done by humans, and so on. What do you see the primary positive changes or impacts that could include well-being as well? How do you see it now, and how is it going to happen in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite a few benefits to the workforce, and I think just to finish off the previous conversation, because it kind of leads into this around, you know, attracting people to the industry. I see if 4.0 is implemented properly, what we're offering is a slightly different role to what it was previously, and actually it's more attractive because you're getting involved in more of the value add tasks than perhaps the risky tasks or the mundane administrative tasks. So I think, you know, one of the positives to the workforce should be that we're going to move to more of a value add role and pivot away from the kind of traditional administration. I think in terms of workforce productivity is the main headline. That's what we're all trying to achieve. I think if you look at some of the examples in the industry, you're reducing gang size down from 10 people to 2 people for certain operations, you know, using the 4.0 technology. So there's great benefit there. There's obviously the safety risk that you mentioned. I don't think that's always spoken about enough. Drones are a great example of that. I think year on year their use is up about 240%. So there's huge sort of development in that area. And why are they doing that? Well, actually, we can send drones into areas that are risky for us, or we don't have time to get to, or, you know, take a lot of resource and time to survey properly. And that's a huge benefit. I think moving forward, and it kind of also talks to the point around how do we attract people. I think with the kind of remote systems that we're implementing, you're opening up the workforce that perhaps traditionally construction may not have attracted. Construction sites are risky, so people with disabilities, etc., may not be able to access them, whereas some of the technology that's being brought on now kind of opens up that gateway to them to say, well, actually, you don't need to be on site, you don't need to be in areas that are tricky. And you know, that is a good thing for our industry because we can start to attract more and more people. So yeah, I think they're kind of the sort of headline terms in terms of benefits to the workforce. Obviously, there's the softer side of things and well-being and stuff like that that will come with it as well.
Thank you, Chris. Amy, do you know Henry? Because he's just put in a comment saying there is no way that ChatGPT could ever replace Amy. I agree with it, but I guess the non-spoken part of that is that the moderator can be replaced by ChatGPT. Well, moving along in our discussion, I think this question is for both Ioannis and Chris. You can go in any order you want. In all this digitized, connected Industry 4.0, what's the role of soft skills? I guess now people call them power skills for a construction professional. Chris, do you want to go first? Ioannis, go ahead, sorry.
A lot of the young people we see at universities haven't actually received enough training, let's say, to be able to live autonomously. And they have to build skills, communication skills, empathy, collaboration skills, to be able to function properly in society, but also in a work environment. But the most important part, I would say, is logos, communication, the ability to go out there and say what you have to say in a precise fashion without being misunderstood. These types of skills, I would say, have gotten better over time, but especially in the high complex environments we work in right now, they've become much more important, because the more complex the points you're trying to make, the better your language precision skills that you need in order to convey those points. Chris.
Yeah, well, just to add example to that, I think a number of projects now that we've gone through procurements for big infrastructure projects, clients are testing soft skills, behavioral assessments, etc. They're really looking at how do the sort of top level executive companies communicate, how do they how will they work under stressful situations? How will they deal with problems that are thrown up on construction projects? And so that's becoming an important factor and given more and more weighting in, which contractor do we go with. So soft skills are very important, and will continue to be from the client side of the industry.
Thank you both, really appreciate that. I think we'll move on to our next question, which is for Amy. And sorry, this question goes to the cost. I guess you did mention where is the money, show me the money. So how can construction companies best balance the cost of investing in new technologies and upskilling staff with the need to remain competitive?
Look, I think you have to look at your business model. Look at what we put in contingency every single project. We've been a very project-based business in construction. That project centricity, I can't tell, I mean, I'm 52 now. When I was in my 30s, they were like, we're not paying for that construction management software unless the owner pays for it. We're not doing that lean stuff unless the owner's paying for it. We're not doing that decarbonization unless the owner pays for it. We have to stop that nonsense. If you want to get ahead, think about all that contingency money you have and take a percentage of that and put it up front in your budget so that people's day jobs are innovation. And we know that's happening. Look, I'll give us some credit. I don't know, when I started out as the 2010 as a prefabrication industrialized construction consultant, people laughed in our faces. It was just me and my group. Now, if you go online and you look at who has a title with industrialized construction in their title, there are thousands and thousands of people around the world when there was only one, like about 10, 15 years ago. We are seeing the titles change. Look how many directors of ARV are there. Look how many directors of digital twins, digital global, digital, digitization. These titles are changing, right? People are investing in this, but you have to move that investment across many different projects at your company level, and you've got to put that money at that level above the project centricity, the project centric model that you have. Forget about who's paying for it. You won't exist anymore unless you move that money up to the top and start investing in it. By the way, also women make 95%, 96% of what men make in this construction industry, compared to about 84% in some other industry. You can't be what you can't see, right? Like, you got to put more people that look like diverse people. We have to have more companies accepting authentic selves, not just telling people they should be authentic. We have to start getting where a challenger is welcomed in the space, where somebody who looks different and speaks different is welcomed in the space instead of shunned. And I think until we do that, we have to invest in people, we have to invest in change, we have to invest in our future. If you don't, everyone will be homogeneous, but you won't exist on this planet very long, I think, past a certain point in time.
Thank you so much. So I think we're pretty close to our finish time here, but what I want to do is a rapid fire for all three of you, 30 to 40 seconds, maybe a call to action or a key takeaway from each one of you. Start with Ioannis, go to Chris, and then Amy.
One key take I would bring to the table here is that as we're looking at skills for the future, we have to understand the life cycle of a new employee. Anyone who starts in the business, they will be having a 30 to 40 year at least work life. In today's standards, that means multiple generations of technologies, that means multiple different roles to play over time. So we have to understand that we're no longer in a world where we can train once at the university and that's it. We have to go into a mode where we keep reskilling people over time as technology is changing more rapidly.
Chris.
So my takeaway is really, if you're starting off on a project, is to look at the outcome that you want. Really sit down and think about that rather than copy and paste what you've done before. And I think by thinking about that and not constraining yourself too much, you can then adopt 4.0 in a more efficient way.
Amy.
I think that, everyone in the world is very good at painting the vision of what's possible. I would give the homework to pick one or two things at your organization that you can impact today that will get you 2 steps closer to that transformation. Just pick 1 or 2 things, put your money where your mouth is, and start something today on the path to that vision.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So my key takeaway for today is organizations like RICS need to revisit the scope and relevance question. I think it's very crucial that we up our game as well and try to run with what's happening both in academia and industry, because we do provide that neutral platform where you can bring ideas and continue to impact our sector. So hopefully with this new renewed approach of whole of life of an asset and outcomes such as decarbonization, social impact, we'll all be able to utilize Industry 4.0 to have a big role in this sector. So with that, I would first like to thank each one of you for I know you're very busy, so thank you for taking the time, but more importantly, sharing your ideas and your wisdom with us and our audience, who I'm sure appreciate what you brought to the discussion today. So a reminder that we will publish a recording and written summary of this webinar online, and please feel free to share those with your professional networks. Please take a few moments to let us know what you thought of today's session by completing the online poll, which will appear on your screens at the end of the webinar. It's very helpful to us if you do that. There is going to be an excellent program coming up called the WBEF Week 2024 that begins on January 29. It's a free digital global event that will focus on accelerating decarbonization across the land and building life cycle. I think we have already close to 50 global speakers. These are senior leaders from all over the world who talk about issues relating to carbon, finance, construction, and whole life carbon assessment, and so on. So please do register. You see the QR code. Please note that the recording of previous webinars are also available online. Please take a look at our podcast series that just crossed, I'm told today, 100,000 downloads. So let's make it 200,000 downloads in 2024. You can follow us on X, Instagram, and LinkedIn, wherever you receive your news. So until next time, goodbye, and thank you for your participation.
Thanks.